Hi everybody, Jeff Garage Maker Guy here, and today going to start working on rebuilding the flippers in this Data East checkpoint pinball machine. So the first thing we do, obviously, because there are high voltages in there, we are going to be touching the wiring, is turning it off with the power switch isn't enough. So you need to unplug it or turn off the breaker, do whatever. Disconnect the power to the pinball machine. And of course we need to unlock the locking bar, get that up like so, slide out the glass, be careful not to break it, and hopefully put it someplace where it won't tip over and shatter. And don't leave it in the sun. I did that with a back glass once. It got heated up and just exploded into a million pieces because it's tempered glass. So anyway, pull the plunger back, lift up the playfield, and get the little prop rod set up. And now we're going to take the camera off and show you what we're going to do here. So, it's kind of dark, so let me get a light so we can see. Okay, that's a little better. So, these two guys here, these two flipper assemblies, we're going to go ahead and take these out and redo them because they're just tired. And it's just you know, a lot of guys when they have these machines out on routes, they just do whatever they can just to keep them running and keep sucking quarters in, and that's great, but I want the machine to run like new. So I've already done a lot of work to this machine, but the flipper coils I did not have, and I did not have the rebuild kits for these ultimate flipper mechanisms. So now that I have them, I purchased them from Marco Spec. They're a pretty decent source for pinball parts. There are several out there. So what I'll do is I'll take pictures of the wiring. It's not terribly involved really, because all you really have are the two wires, because it's a solid state flipping mechanism, I guess. So this is there's no end of stroke switches or things like that. So we just need to unsolder those, pull out the mechanisms by undoing the Phillips screws. These plates come off. Then we're going to take it all apart on a bench and rebuild them on the bench because it's so much easier to do than trying to do it while it's in the machine. And then we'll put it all back together. So I'll see you on the workbench in just a little bit. We've got our flipper assemblies, the right and the left, out of the machine, and as you can see, they're pretty dirty and kind of worn out. So we're going to be replacing pretty much all of the coil, the sleeves, the springs, the plunger, and all the other crap. This part right here that sticks out is where the flipper comes through from the playfield into the back, and that's really kind of all of it's important to replace when you service these things. Just get a rebuild kit. Don't try to just do one little piece. Just do the whole thing. It'll save you a lot of grief. Anyway, we'll get started tearing this down. This is the rebuild kit from Marco Spec. It's got all sorts of wonderful things in it. Some of them we will not be using, like the end of stroke switches, which are on most pinball machine flippers. This actually has a solid state flipper. It's done by timing, where it does the high voltage initially and then it switches to a lower voltage if the flipper button is held to like hold the ball, for example, because you do not want to energize the coil with the high voltage for a long period of time because it'll get hot. You'll burn them up quickly. So the end of stroke switches do that mechanically. This does it solid state wise. It does it through a timer. And anyway, so here are the two coils that I got. Go ahead and open this stuff up later after we tear this thing down. A nice set of Exolite nut drivers here. And the first thing we're going to do is get the coil out. So handy Allen wrenches here. Hopefully I picked the right one. Wow, that's a first. I got the right one. When you assemble these, when you put them back together, you want to use, I use the red Loctite because they come loose. So, God, these things are in here really good. I didn't use red Loctite on these, but anyway, I'm going to go use the vise off camera. And I will be back in just a second. Okay, so these do actually have, they did have red Loctite on them from the factory. So I have never rebuilt these flippers. So this is what they call the coil stop. This is important. This is a little kind of a spring-loaded washer that helps keep the coil in place, so it doesn't float around in there. But these coil stops, let's get a new one out here. They actually do wear out, so it's important. If you get a good flipper rebuild kit, it will have new coil stops. So I don't know if you can see this, but let's try to use. So here's the old one, all right. Dingy, crappy, and here's the new one. But what you may or may not be able to see is the height, how much the other one has worn down. It's probably worn down about 1/8 of an inch here, which is going to cause problems. The plunger, it's just bad. Replace everything. When you rebuild the flipper, rebuild the flipper. Don't just replace the one part that you think is bad. So, old coil stop, new coil stop, the nuts for that, the spring-loaded washer that needs to go in, and here is the old coil. I mean, let's get a new coil out here for comparison, and you'll be able to see what we're talking about here. I know I should have a knife here, but I don't. Anyway, so here are brand new coils. So, this is what a new coil should look like. Nice. And the sleeve is nice and clean. It's got smooth edges, and it's all wonderful. Okay. This is an old nasty coil. This is the one we just pulled out. So you can see that it's gotten hot. It's got a lot of that, metal dust in there, and I can barely pull the sleeve out because it got so hot inside from the coil, being over-energized and overworked because it's traveling farther down because the coil stop's worn off, and I can't even get this out. And now you can see my hands are just getting totally dirty. So this is, God, I can't even pull this thing out. Anyway, I don't know if you can see inside there, but it's not a smooth wall anymore. So that creates resistance for the plunger, making the coil work harder, and it's these are way overdue to be replaced. So it's a good thing we're doing this. Another thing to keep note of is you'll notice that there is a diode. Some older machines didn't have diodes, but some do. So it's really important to know how those diodes are actually, I don't know if you can see the silver band on the diode, which one's the cathode, one's the anode, positive, negative, forward biasing. Look up how diodes work if you don't know. Just make sure you put it in the same way, or have the wires hooked up correctly. Otherwise you might not have a great day. So anyway, old nasty coil, nice new coil. That's for the other side. And so next, so now with the coil out, we have enough room to actually move the plunger and that assembly out, and we can look at this. We're going to be replacing this entire thing. One of the things that typically happens with these is this linkage gets worn, it starts having too much play, and it doesn't operate smoothly, all of which make for a lesser game playing experience, and also makes everything work harder. And so we're going to get rid of that. That's the return spring and the plunger assembly, and we're going to go ahead and line up the new ones here. So in this case there is a left and a right, I believe. So I don't believe that they are. That is correct. So here is the one, here is the new one. Oh, I love this. You got these two springs coiled up together. Oh, it's not going to be too bad. Perfect. So there's our new return spring. I mean, look at the amount of compression. So this one is the old one. This one is the new one. And we can see there's a little difference here. So again, this is going to really change. It's going to restore, rejuvenate the way this machine plays, and without getting frustrated over the flipper not being powerful enough to fling the ball around and all that good stuff. So it actually did come, this rebuild kit, it's actually really good. It came with new compression springs, so we're going to put that in the new pile, and we're going to put this one in the old pile. And this is going to be for the other side, so we'll get this guy set up over here. The springs are over there. And so these are extra parts, or parts that are used for other specific machines. So this kit is a rebuild kit for Data East and Sega machines through a certain date range. So some of them will need, I might even need these, I have to look a little bit more closely. These are different sleeves. And of course these are the end of stroke switches, which we are not going to be using because we have solid state flippers. I actually prefer end of stroke switches. And these types of return springs are not used in our configuration, so we won't be using those either. And since the plunger, these are extra caps for this, so we're not going to need those. We'll be using that. We'll get to that in a second. I don't know if I'm going to need these or not. So, sorry about the phone ringing, and that'll stop it in a minute. Okay, so we're down to this base piece. We could take these two parts off, but we don't need to. And so why do it? So we are going to replace this. So we have a 1/4-inch nut driver, and these will come out pretty easily. So, old one, nasty, dirty, not very clean on the inside, equals friction. Here's the nice new one. Those notches in that ring are to get around. This thing goes in here like so. You can see that there is a little notch there, and the reason why there's one on the other side is because the other flipper, the left flipper, requires its opposite of this, so it needs the notch over here. Anyway, enough of that. So before I put this together, I'm going to wipe it off a little bit, clean it up, and then we'll start putting the new stuff in. Sorry about that. Should have had those out before I turned on camera. But hey, that's why I'm not a producer. Pinballs, slot cars, remote control cars, and all sorts of other things. Those are my hobbies. Doing videos is not my hobby. And as I said in many of my other videos, I appreciate good editing. I am not that guy. So just trying to share a little bit of knowledge. Pinball machines are just a lot of fun, and it's just a different experience than a video game. Even though I'm building a virtual pinball machine, that's just because there's a lot of machines that I don't have anymore that I want to be able to play again, and I just don't have the space for them and the time to maintain them. Pinball machines need regular maintenance. They don't need much unless you let them go. If you let them go, it can get very time consuming. When I was shopping machines for some pretty big vendors that had a lot of machines for several arcades and on the routes, it would take me, God, 20 to 40 hours to do one machine. I mean, that's stripping it down to the playfield, going through every single screw, and that's because those machines were abused for 8 to 12 hours a day, sitting in bars filled with smoke, getting drinks spilled on them, people trying to steal the money out of them, all sorts of other crap. But if you do the regular maintenance for a home use machine, always change out the batteries in them once a year. Those usually, most of the machines have batteries like 3 AA's that maintain the high scores. And unfortunately, a lot of the older machines have those batteries right in the middle of the motherboard. So when they start leaking, they leak all over the board, start to dissolve traces. That can be expensive. But regular maintenance involves cleaning the playfield, replacing the pinballs. If you keep your playfield clean and the rest of the stuff clean, the pinballs should last forever. But as the dirt and grime starts to get spun around the playfield, the balls can get pitted, and they actually act like abrasive balls. They don't roll as well, they don't play as well, it's just bad. So keeping the playfield clean, keeping the pinballs clean are really important. Making sure the lights are all working, replace those, and yeah, that's pretty much it. The rubber is also another thing, especially if you have poorly climate controlled or no climate. Do not get a pinball machine if you think you can just keep it outside. Very, very bad idea. Humidity will destroy these things. The rubber on them will rot, which I'm actually a little upset because I say I just did this, but the last time this machine was serviced, it was by me, and I put new rubbers on it, and I didn't play it very much, but I can already feel the cracking starting around here, and that's just because humidity, heating, cooling, up and down, it wears and tears rubber. So rubber kits, there's a lot of people that are charging way too much for the rubber ring kits. I think on Amazon, I don't know who it is, I'm not going to say it, but there are other places to get rubber kits. One of the places I used to go to was, I believe it was Steve Young at the Pinball Resource in New York. Just call them up, tell them what machine you have, and they'll hook you up. Marco Spec, those are pretty reasonable places. If you buy your stuff on Amazon through a reseller that's out there, he's going to charge you 2 to 3 times what those rings actually cost. And I do recommend getting a kit if you're going to do your rings. Anyway, back to this. We've got it all wiped down. It's ready for the new coil. We have to put it together in the reverse order of the way that we did this before. So, okay, let's just first make sure we have the right one. And I don't, so I had these backwards. It's very important because once you put it in there, you can't flip it over without taking it all apart again, or at least taking out the coil. So, yeah, that looks about right. So, we're going to put our return spring, throw that guy in here. Now, is this the right stop? I'm going to use the coil stops, the plunger tubes, coil sleeves is what they're called, I believe. That came with the kit because that matches the plunger that came in the kit. So that's the way we're going to go with that. And I believe so. All right, so let's see if I can point this out. So you see this little notch here, and on this coil, there's a little thingy there. Well, the little thingy goes in the little notch. Sorry for the technical verbiage there, but that's the way it is. Okay, so we got that. We have our coil stop, our tension washer, whatever you want to call it. Spring washer is what it's called. And basically just gonna put that back together like so. Make sure there's nothing horribly wrong with this. Almost did this without putting in the Loctite, so obviously I'm just going to well, for some reason these aren't quite lining up, so Just going to loosen up the front end a little bit. That should give us the, yep, and that gave us the room that we need to get these screws in. All right. Nice. So we're going to put this guy back in here. The new spring flipper, whatever. Flipper bushing, that's what that's called. Flipper bushing, sorry. Okay. New one of those in there. Yeah, I think I paid, I want to say I paid like 40 bucks for this rebuild kit or something like that. And the one that I saw on Amazon was like $119. So, not doing it. Okay, so I'm just gonna put the flipper in here so you guys can see. Okay. Sometimes this is fun. Okay. And there we go. All right. Okay. Okay, so this all have to be tightened up. I'm gonna take it all apart off camera and put the Loctite on it and reassemble it. But this is the rebuilt flipper with all the new hardware in it. It's super smooth, it's snappy, it returns quickly. There's no friction on the plunger travel going up and down, in and out of the coil. And it feels solid again, it's not all janky. So that is a flipper rebuilt, and of course I'm talking and didn't have stuff ready, and I think it took me about 20 minutes for one side. So granted, I've done a few hundred of these, but that's it. You can make your pinball machine like new again, just with a little bit of work and not a huge amount of cash. Anyway, we'll be back when I have them both ready to go back into the machine, and I'll show you some stuff to look for when reinstalling the flipper assemblies back in the machine, which I do have some of those things that I need to address, and I'll show you what those are in the next video. Well, we've got our rebuilt flipper assemblies back in, and they're all soldered up, and all the flippers are adjusted on the other side of the playfield. So they're in the right positions. This game doesn't have the holes all the way through. I don't know if you can see this in the picture. This is really kind of an annoying light. But there's usually some dimples or indicators of where the flippers should be. I usually just set them up so this lane over here, this guide is, the flipper is at the same angle as this, so the ball runs straight through. And sometimes you have to adjust a little bit to make sure you can make all the shots and things like that, but it's all back together, and I've already tried it out and it works a lot better. So a couple of things that I wanted to talk about, some of the biggest mistakes I've made, and I know a lot of other people have made when servicing pinball machines. Really, really important before you do any work. Understand that this plate field is only, you know, it's not even as thick as my finger. Like, it's about as thick as your pinky. So the length of screws, make sure it's really, really important. You just don't, if you're missing a screw, just don't grab one and stuff it in there, because all it takes is for the tip of that screw to go through the top of the play field, and it's not going to be pretty. The other thing is the screws coming down. You can see here that we have some ones that are really sticking down far. It's not a problem because there's nothing in the way. But on this flipper assembly, actually, you can, I don't know if you can see it, but one of these was sticking out underneath, and it wasn't allowing it to tighten all the way down. So just be aware of anytime you're doing any work with screwing stuff into the playfield. The other thing is these are wood screws, and if you strip them out, these 6 big screws that hold the flipper assemblies, and basically any of the screws that go in from the bottom of the playfield, yeah, you got to be really careful. Don't use a, you know, one of those impact drivers, cordless impact drivers, or a screwdriver, electric screwdriver, unless you have a clutch and it's set appropriately. Do things hand tight, and you don't need to be a gorilla. They have to be tight, but not too tight, because if you strip them out, it can be repaired. You have to put some wood filler in there and re-drill it, or stuff some toothpicks in there. That's a good trick, by the way. Stuff some toothpicks in there, break them off, and then put the screw in very gently. Anyway, that's it. It's working, and yeah, I'll probably throw it up on Craigslist here in the next week or so. I still want to go through and wipe it all down and clean it up. I know that these things are, I don't know, I've seen them going for $3,000 to $5,000, and some of those aren't in as good a shape as this one. So I'm going to be asking probably $2,500 for this. I hope you load it in your truck or whatever. But anyway, I might just keep it, but I have to make space for another machine. Anyway, you guys have fun, be safe. Talk to you soon. Bye.